at the Afterlife Symposium in Phoenix, and I just had this very powerful experience that it seems like you do this all over the country. Let's start with that, and then we'll go backwards into some of the other work that you're doing.
All right, so what you just experienced is called the Angel Wash. I learned it from Alan Cohen, who's a spiritual teacher from Hawaii. And yes, I've led it with tens of thousands of people over the last 20 years, including Brian Weiss's workshop or a week-long training where we had 90 psychologists and psychiatrists and on the beach, and up to 350 people at a time. So
Have you
very
ever done
powerful.
anything with Tony Robbins?
Well, I went through all his life mastery and all those trainings, but we didn't do any angel washes there.
Yeah, that would be a good place. I was
Yeah, it
just
would be.
thinking of that.
If we can still walk after the fire walks, I've done 3 of those. So, these are designed to replicate as much as possible one of the things that happens when people pass on. And it's commonly reported through near-death experiences, evidential mediums, life between life sessions, that people are, first of all, greeted by their loved ones, people and pets, but also receive a healing shower to help wash away any of the lower energy emotions, fear, anger, pain, sadness, whatever, and then to get recharged and remember who they are.
At a soul level.
Yeah, so we can duplicate this. And as I mentioned in the introduction, a year ago we had a woman named Brenda who was there. She was on oxygen. She was in a wheelchair. She wasn't doing very well. And did the angel wash. About 6 months ago, she did change worlds and very quickly came through 2 of the top mediums on our planet, Suzanne Wilson and Suzanne Giesman, and told them, it's wonderful over here. I love the reunion, the healing shower. It was just like Mark's angel wash.
Oh, lovely. That's
yeah,
lovely.
so that's some nice interdimensional validation.
Very, very nice. And you've been doing this for how many years?
20 with the angel wash.
Yeah, it's a beautiful song. I mean, we have it at home. We played it a lot. There's something energetically and vibrationally, I think, that you just feel when you feel that song. It just kind of comes through and shifts things.
Yeah, it invites people to remember who they are, why they came here. And there are certainly cross-cultural reminders of that. For example, in Buddhism, they say, we each are like a golden, ornately decorated door.
Oh, I like
It's been
that.
a long weekend. Bowl, rather, from which emits shining white light. However, many of us get our bowl filled with mud and crud. Who do you think you are, and being made fun of and being judged for whatever external reason. And so for a lot of people, their light is blocked. They forget who they are. So things like this, also a holistic breathing that I have created a technique for, and others, help people release those old wounds, needless fears, stuck emotions, so they can get back in touch.
So is the breathing technique that you do, is it similar to the Ujjayi breath that so many yogis would be familiar with?
Yeah, I'm not familiar with that. This is 45 minutes of noisy, prolonged diaphragmatic breathing. I originally learned it from Rusty Barrier. It's called Daleth breathing with a D, but Stan Groff, Jacqueline Small, Tom Good, others have used different techniques. Suzanne Giesman and I did a workshop together last year, and she encouraged me to create my own version. But basically
It's 45 minutes.
yeah, it uses different sorts of music, coaching in the background. I'm saying things. It's safe to feel all that I feel. It's time to remember. And with the breathing and all, what it's designed to do is to open up the filtration.
The third eye, yeah.
You understand that 95% of what the central nervous system does is inhibit sensory input. It's functional, it's adaptive, it's what kept our ancestors from getting killed. However, now in the 21st century, we can open that up a bit, and that's why meditation and yoga and things like that help us see more of that greater reality. Most of the time we miss over 99% of it.
Yes, we do. You have had Soul Proof. That's been out for a little over 10 years, correct?
Yeah, probably almost 20. It started with a spiral-bound version.
Oh, did you really?
Yeah.
I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah, I started collecting information 45 years ago, actually. I was 20 years old. I was a respiratory therapist and working with people who died almost every shift, including little children, just made me say, what in the world is going on? And so that's why I went to theology school instead of medical school, became a clinical psychologist and now holistic physician, all the time collecting everything I learned. I went to everybody's classes and workshops, Raymond Moody, Brian Weiss, I mentioned. And if I'd see a newspaper article or something, a magazine, and eventually I had a few boxes of material, put it together, and there's the book, 9 Categories of Evidence that collectively show without a doubt that we're forever beings.
When you were working with people in the nursing homes, I know you've done a lot of work in even mental health facilities. What was the earliest, I guess, sort of examples or stories where you felt something? Not just going through the experience, but perhaps maybe a psychic connection to the other side yourself.
Well, first of all, I don't think I ever totally lost it. When I was 5 years old, my parents were showing me a beautiful sunset, and I told them it reminded me of God. And they only told me that 20 years later when I was in theology school. So that suggests at least a partial remembrance. However, a lot of children will close down around 5 or 6. Well, for whatever reason, I didn't. So I felt like a stranger in a strange land, growing up in the Midwest and earthly ways. It was almost like I had to learn how to be a good earthling. So I would watch, I love sports, but I watched a football game and thought, boy, it's a lot of emphasis on moving a pigskin up and down a field. What if we took 10% of those resources to feed the poor? And my family, for example, my brother, sister, mom, and dad would be watching sitcoms with that canned laughter, which I couldn't stand. I'll go to another part of the house and just get down on the floor and, oh, that feels good, and that feels good. And then years later found out they were yoga postures.
Oh, interesting. And you naturally just knew them.
Yeah, but the real objective evidence came in when I had a psychic reading with 2 different people, and as soon as they saw me, they said, whoa, we don't get many of you in these parts. And I said, what do you mean? And they said, you're a teaching soul that rarely incarnates on a place like Earth. And like I say, 2 and really a third even saying I have a unique perspective on things, and I had huge missions to come in and share. But to get back to your question, in terms of clinical settings, because I was in ER and ICU most of the time, I did see a couple times that just before the time of death was called, faint white light emanate from the person's chest, which suggests their soul or consciousness.
So you could see it.
Yeah, a few times. Like I got my peripheral vision, it'd be night shift, I'd be tired. It's one of those things, if you look on straight on and analyze, I probably wouldn't have seen it.
Yeah, and maybe you were seeing also some of their auric fields as well.
Well, I just had lunch yesterday with William Peters, and he was telling me about the book he's getting ready to write with Raymond Moody, Shared Death Experiences. And so I think that's part of the reason I was able to perceive this, because I had spent usually a couple hours with the person, and as I said, I was in theology school at the time, so I'm the guy that would set up the airway, tube them, get them on the ventilator, and then I would talk in their ears, because no one else is attending to that in the mid-70s. It's okay, don't be afraid. We're going to do everything we can to save you. However, if you don't make it, it's good too. You're surrounded by the light, so you can't lose here. And so we had that shared connection, and perhaps that's why I could sense then their parting.
Did you, back in the 70s, when this was less accepted, did you ever, were you ever met with resistance from some of the techniques or some of the, just even language that you may have used with people getting ready to die in the more traditional medical settings?
Yeah, it was much like now, actually. There's about 10% of people who are really open to it. And so I quickly learned how to be cool about it, not flaunt it. But I'm sure I was identified as a weirdo, but I don't care. I hope I'm weird in this
Not
world.
so much anymore. I think things are shifting. Or you must be seeing things shift now in terms of acceptance.
Yeah, it has a lot, but we have a way to go.
And so where do you think that you can bring your work? I mean, obviously in an Afterlife Symposium, everyone's open to it or they wouldn't be here. But what about bringing this in? I mean, obviously you're doing this in sort of medical and mental health facilities and areas, but where else could you go with this?
Well, that's why we're going with the Greater Reality Living groups. As I mentioned, Dr. Gary Schwartz and I wrote the book Greater Reality Living. Greater reality is our term then for that 99.999% of reality that we usually don't sense with our five senses, but is nonetheless very real and there. And with all of his scientific research and lots of other clinical research, it's clear that that greater reality does exist. We can sense it sometimes, and then the more of that we do, the more our questions are answered, like, why would God take my child, and why did my spouse die, and so on. We understand more of the big picture. Mm-hmm. So greater reality living then invites people to consider, all right, once I realize there is this greater reality, so much more to life than meets the eye, how does that affect the way I live and treat others? And so we're starting to launch. We just finished the website, greaterrealityliving.com.
greaterrealityliving.com.
And
okay.
We already have, even though we haven't even launched, 70 people from 14 different countries who have expressed interest in starting groups in their areas. So we will have online and then local meetings around the world.
And then what's the primary goal of these meetings?
Yeah, the acronym LIVES helps explain that. And L stands for learn the evidence, all the scientific,
Not
clinical.
love, it doesn't stand for love.
I couldn't work that one out. Yeah, so L for learn the evidence, I for internalize that information, and that's part of what we did with the angel wash and the holistic breathing and so on.
It's feeling it at a DNA level almost.
Exactly. We don't just want a superficial intellectual knowing, we want a deep knowing, so that when a child passes or a spouse, you get the cancer diagnosis, whatever, like, okay, I can deal with this. I'm an eternal being. I'm one with the one. And how to do that, how to internalize that, B, how to vitalize yourself.
Wow.
So we've got to turn this around, and the technology and the knowledge is available to do that.
Are you finding, so what are some of the linkages that you're seeing related to ADD, ADHD, and autism specifically?
Well, do you want to wrap up the LIVES and the Greater Reality Living acronym first and come back to that?
Sure,
Okay.
we can do that.
All right. That would be a big sidebar. All right, so we're talking about the LIVES acronym for the Greater Reality Living group. So the V, vitalize and balance yourself holistically. The E for enjoy the benefits, and as you know, it's a whole nother life. I mean, life makes so much more sense when you know that no one really dies. We see our loved ones again, certainly when we pass, and we can now communicate with them, and the whole list of benefits that go along with knowing the great news that set us free, what Jesus and Buddha and other great teachers were trying to let us know. And then finally, the S is for serve others and ourselves.
Serve
a lot of
others
people don't do that.
Yeah, feed ourselves up so that we have the energy to go out and serve.
And make the world a better place. So that's the formula, and these groups then will be a place where people can get together, learn this information, share their personal experiences. One of the things we hear so often is people say, there's nobody, I've had a near-death experience or out-of-body experience or after-death contact, but there's nobody I can share it with. They think I was weird. Well, we're going to have groups of weirdos where people can share these and find out really just how common they are. They are so common. And then consider how they can bring light and more love and harmony to their communities.
I think, what you say is so valid. It's interesting, like the moment you open up and you have the courage to open up, how many other people have had a similar experience where
Yes.
they think, oh, it's just intuition, but it's so much more.
Yeah. So if you want to go back to the ADD and the common threads.
Yeah, because I've been working in Silicon Valley for 20 years, and we're just seeing a huge increase of particularly autism. So I feel personally there's some relationship to being disconnected from nature and from what makes us. And
That's one factor. There are actually about 15, and the thing is everyone's unique, like a combination lock, so you have to get the right combination. So there are articles excuse me, about all this on my website, soulproof.com.
Okay.
Extensive articles sharing all this information for your viewers. But some of the most common causes, in my opinion, in my experience, are heavy metals and chemicals that we get from food, air, water, body care products, home cleaning products. They're ubiquitous. One recent study looked at umbilical cord blood in newborns, and they found up to 250 chemicals in the placental blood,
Really?
which is supposed to be filtered.
Yeah, that's amazing.
So we've got to turn around. The brain is not built to deal with all that.
What about EMFs and toxicity from EMFs?
That's one. Yeah, that's one of the factors. We say there are 6 stressors. So that's chemicals, heavy metals, an overabundance of microorganisms, whether those are viruses, bacteria, yeast, fungus, parasites, EMF, EMR. Scars can cause these problems, nutritional deficiencies. So these need to be addressed. And the body is an amazing self-healing, self-aware organism. But if there are these huge stressors to keep it from healing itself, it can't. So the website I would share with, or the email address, website address I would share, it's been a long 3 days, is UNS Uncle Nancy Sam Inc., like incorporated, .info.
Okay.
UNSinc.info. So this is for nutrition response testing, which I have found to be the most powerful single technique I'm aware of in my 46 years in holistic health center or settings. Another really powerful one is applied kinesiology. Both use subtle muscle testing then to determine, and testing vials to determine what, if any, of the stressors are involved, and then what are the particular nutritional deficiencies. Because organs are not all or none, like 100% or dead. They can have various levels of functioning. So, for example, the adrenals or the thyroid or the brain can get tuned up and heal themselves, and then the symptoms go away, whether it's ADD, autism, we've had multiple sclerosis, just about anything you can name. The body can heal itself if it has what it needs to do its job right.
And then, I think the other piece that, I mentioned it earlier, but getting back connected to earth and nature. And then I think the other thing that we don't have as much as we did 100 years ago is community. A sense of community in place to support the changes and the transitions that you're going through in life.
You're exactly right. And that's why it's so important to have centering practices, like earthing, like walking in nature and so on, and why having kindred spirits, whether it's at unity centers or chanting or drumming circles and so on, is so important to have others to help us through this earth walk.
Oh, so you just mentioned drumming, and tell us about that, because we're huge believers of sound healing. And so have you seen some interesting results?
Well, we're blessed in where we live in Ohio, the land of the Shawnee Tecumseh, to have several Native American teacher dear friends. So we're in drum circles left and right. And as you know, it's a cross-cultural practice. Again, to help quiet the mind, any repetitive sound like that. Also, the energy of it, yes, emanates. And then we remember. It's so easy to remember. It's really all around us. Life, nature shouts it. If we take just a little time to get in touch with that.
Yeah, absolutely, which is going back to what our soul already knows, right? We're soul first and human second.
Yeah.
So the latest book, the 11 questions that you're dealing with 11 different experts, including Gary Schwartz, who we're a fan of his work. Tell us a little bit about that and what you uncovered from those 11 experts.
Yeah, I've been blessed to have 2 radio shows where I was a radio host. One was Solutions around 2000, where I interviewed people like Wayne Dyer, Bernie Siegel, Michael Newton, Brian Weiss. And then 6 or so years ago, Ask the Soul Doctors, where I interviewed Dr. Schwartz, Stan Groff, Anita Moorjani, just a whole list of really brilliant minds, and asked them all the same 11 questions, which most people eventually get to, especially when it hits the fan. Who am I? Why am I here? What happens after I die?
What's my purpose?
Is there a God? If so, why is there so much suffering? Yeah, how can I best live while I'm on earth? And to get their answers was just a wonderful experience. So those radio interviews, by the way, are available to listen to free on soulproof.com, the top tab radio shows.
Great. It's a great name. So, I mean, how did you come up with that name originally?
The 11 questions?
No, the soul, your main website.
Soul Proof. It's been too long ago, and too many brain processes ago, but has a double meaning. First of all, proof that we are souls.
Yeah.
But then secondly, we each are soul proof, just like a watch is shock proof or waterproof. That is, no matter what happens, we can handle it. You know, you hear the saying, God doesn't give us more than we can handle. Be a religious way of looking at it. But secondly, when we know that we're eternal beings of consciousness, energy, that's partly why I became a doctor of chiropractor. They had in the late 1800s a philosopher. They said another name for the creator and sustainer of all life is universal intelligence.
Yes.
And each of us has a spark of that within, which they term innate intelligence, that inner wisdom. And it knows what to do as long as there aren't interferences to blocking that, whether that's spinal cord pressure or nutritional deficiencies, being disconnected, etc.
Or feeling out of alignment. I don't mean physical alignment, I mean out of alignment.
Right?
You know, when you live in a society where you feel like a weirdo because you've had this experience, and suddenly you're out of alignment with who you really are, when the truth is that we are all souls.
Well, that's why we're doing this and spreading it. And the nice thing is, people remember so quickly. In the angel wash we just had, there was a woman who said, as soon as I closed my eyes and started walking down the aisle and the music started playing, I had a Satori moment. She said, I was really, oh my God, have I been so worried about? I'm part of God. You know, I'm an eternal spirit. It can happen that quickly.
It was such a beautiful, I mean, I've done similar, I don't know if I've done that exact one before, but to that music somewhere, so it's probably part of your work. And it's always just so profound to feel that embraced and loved by strangers.
Sufi dancing is another that's so powerful. In Albuquerque, we had a consciousness and science symposium. There were 500 people in this huge ballroom in concentric circles, if you can imagine, and then doing the Sufi various cultural chanting and dancing, and so it's out there for those who really want to change and answer their questions.
Healing. And I think that's really good advice, because it's, we were talking earlier to some scientists on this, where it's becoming obviously a lot more common to meditate and go to yoga, and it's being embraced more than ever, particularly in California where we live, but elsewhere in the world. But I think a lot of people, they feel like, oh, I can't meditate, or I can't go there, it's too hard for me. And I love what's happening now is that there's so many different ways to get there. If you're an artist and you're crazy, you have a busy life, that you can actually do a walking meditation or go to a drumming circle, and that there's so many different ways to get there. So I think that's
whatever
a great
helps
message.
Quiet the monkey mind, the chatter, to help be still and know I am God.
So any sort of advice for people who are listening right now on doing that, if you are a type A personality, that's hard to go there. Maybe you're not religious, maybe you're more agnostic. How do you tap into that? What would be some tips?
I'd say for people to consider what gives them peace. Maybe they like take a jog, a walk in nature, play with animals, serve others. I mean, going to a nursing home or feeding homeless people. What gives you joy? What gives you peace? What helps quiet your mind a little so you're not worrying and analyzing all the time? And that's a good path to start with.
I love that. Thank you very much. Thanks for being here today.
Thank you for what you're
And
doing.
I loved your angel wash. It was beautiful. And you can find out more on soulproof.com.
Again, this is congruent with everything from quantum physics understandings to reports from evidential mediums, near-death experiences, life between life sessions, and so on, that not only are we all eternal beings and integral parts of all that is right now, but we're all especially interconnected in a very meaningful way.